Japan trusted America for 70 years, but in 2025 that trust is breaking. After building U.S. factories, creating over 800,000 jobs, and standing by Washington on defense and trade, Japan now feels betrayed. With crushing tariffs, tech pressure, and hostile policies, Tokyo's fighting back. Is this the end of a crucial alliance or just the beginning of a new global power shift? Stay tuned, and if you care about global economics, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Japan, a U.S. ally for over 70 years, is feeling betrayed. They've collaborated on trade, military, defense, and technology, with Japan opening its markets to American businesses and hosting U.S. military bases. In return, Japan expected a reliable partnership. But in 2025 that relationship is unraveling, and many blame Washington for turning its back on its Asian ally. Here's why Japan's upset. Japan is one of the largest investors in the U.S., supporting over 800,000 American jobs through automakers like Toyota, Honda, Nissan, and Mitsubishi. Yet the Trump administration has hit Japan with policies that feel like a direct attack on its economy. First, the U.S. claims Japanese cars are a national security threat and is preparing to impose tariffs as high as 25 to 30%. This isn't just a trade dispute, it's economic punishment targeting a close ally when Japan's economy is already struggling. Second, the U.S. is pressuring Japan to stop selling its advanced semiconductor equipment to China, limiting Japan's trade options. And if that's not enough, the U.S. is also targeting Japan's rice imports, piling on more pressure. It feels like the U.S. wants Japan's economy to crumble. But Japan isn't staying silent. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba called the tariffs extremely disappointing and regrettable, warning of a national crisis that demands a bold response. Top trade negotiator Ryos Akazawa was blunt, saying the tariffs are unacceptable and must be reconsidered. Finance Minister Katsunobu Katsuo warned these measures threaten both Japan's and global economies, risking slower recovery and unstable financial systems. Bank of Japan Governor Kazuya added that the economic outlook is weakening, forcing a more cautious approach to policy. Here's the kicker. Japan holds significant investments in the United States. If they pull out, it could spell trouble, not just for Wall Street, but for the entire U.S. economy, which might, really struggle to fund its budget. Japan's signaling they're ready to play hardball. While Japan views new U.S. tariffs as a hostile move, Washington actually sees them differently. U.S. officials argue these tariffs aren't about punishment but about leveling a trade relationship that's been lopsided for decades. They point out that Japanese automakers still benefit from favorable regulations and currency advantages. While American car makers struggle to break into Japan's domestic market, the Trump administration pitches these tariffs as a push for fairness and a way to protect national security, especially as the global auto industry races toward electric and autonomous vehicles, fields where U.S. companies are fighting to catch up. But Japan's not backing down. Tokyo has drawn a hard line, insisting trade talks won't move forward unless the U.S. reconsiders its tariffs. After high-level negotiations in Washington, Japan's economic revitalization minister Akazawa put it plainly, no deal will happen unless tariffs are tackled as part of a broader agreement. This blunt stance marks a shift from Japan's usually diplomatic tone, signaling growing frustration. Even Japan's prime minister admitted that a trade deal with the U.S. is still a long way off. Japan's position is now more defiant than conciliatory. Tokyo has made it clear, no trade concessions unless Washington eases up on tariffs. But this isn't just about cars. It's a sign of a deeper rift. The U.S. seems to be treating Japan less like a trusted ally, and more like a piece in its political chess game. This tension could hit Japan's economy hard, and ripple back to American workers who rely on Japanese companies. Here's what many Americans might not realize. Japan is a cornerstone of the U.S. economy. If Japan pulls back, the fallout could be massive. Key industries could face serious disruption, and some might even collapse. Let's break down why Japan matters so much. Japanese automakers like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan have been investing in the U.S. for decades. They didn't just ship cars from Japan, they built factories across states like Texas, Kentucky, Alabama, and Mississippi. These plants churn out over 3 million vehicles annually, mostly for American buyers. In 2023, Japanese brands made up nearly half of all vehicles sold in the U.S., with Toyota topping the charts as the #1 brand. In 2024, Toyota alone sold over 4.4 million vehicles. Without Japanese automakers, nearly half the cars on American roads wouldn't exist. And these aren't just any cars, they're reliable, affordable, and often outperform many American brands. Then there's the jobs. Japanese automakers directly or indirectly employ over 500,000 Americans, with some estimates reaching as high as 840,000. That includes factory workers, office staff, car dealers, and parts suppliers. In total, more than 2 million U.S. jobs are tied to this industry, generating over $90 billion in wages each year. This trade dispute isn't just a policy spat, it's a high-stakes clash that could reshape economies on both sides. Japanese companies contribute over $30 billion in taxes to the U.S., supporting schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. These are jobs that aren't easily replaced. Yet, the White House is now treating these companies like a threat. Imposing tariffs of 25% or higher will drive up the cost of their vehicles, making them less affordable and reducing sales. This could force Japanese companies to scale back U.S. operations, close factories, and cut jobs. The impact will hit not just Japan, but American communities that rely on these businesses. This doesn't feel like the act of an ally, it feels like a betrayal. Japan has long trusted the U.S., welcoming American companies, collaborating on defense, and aligning with U.S. policies. In return, it's now being treated like an economic adversary, and Tokyo didn't see it coming. The situation is even trickier because Japan is caught between two global powers. On one side, the U.S. is threatening its auto industry with steep tariffs. On the other, China is flooding markets with low-cost electric vehicles backed by heavy government subsidies. Japan can't compete with China's prices and still turn a profit. If tariffs make Japanese cars pricier in the U.S., they'll also lose ground to Chinese competitors. Japan is stuck in a tough spot, squeezed by U.S. trade barriers and China's subsidized market dominance. Adapting quickly is critical, but economic pressure makes rapid change challenging. At the heart of this tension lies another issue: computer chips. Japan produces advanced machines essential for manufacturing semiconductors, and about half of them are sold to China. The U.S. wants to halt these sales to slow China's technological advancements. The car tariffs, they're leveraged to pressure Japan into cutting off chip equipment exports to China. This isn't just about cars or rice, it's about controlling technology and using economic muscle for political goals. So recently, U.S. Congress sent a private urgent letter to Japan's ambassador in Washington. Unlike other communications, this one wasn't publicized, and that really signals just how serious and sensitive the issue is. The U.S. is worried that China's growing chip production could soon dominate half the global supply of legacy chips, those critical components used in cars, electronics, and even military equipment. The U.S. recently sent a letter to Japan urging it to stop selling chip-making equipment to China. The argument here is that Japanese and other Western companies aren't losing out by cutting off China. In fact, their stock prices are actually climbing. The U.S. also touted its own massive investments to supercharge its domestic chip industry, nudging allies like Japan to follow suit. But here's the real kicker: the U.S. is zeroing in on Chinese tech giant Huawei. They're claiming Huawei's secretly building chip factories and hiding its involvement, which Washington sees as a major red flag. So, what's the U.S. really doing here? It's pushing Japan to pick a side, align with Washington, and help slow China's rise in the chip game, even if it means Japan takes a hit on its business. Japan's caught in a tough spot. It could cave to U.S. pressure, halt sales of chip machines to China, and hope the U.S. lifts its tariffs in return. But that would mean surrendering control over a key chunk of its economy and risking tensions with China, which is a huge trading partner. Alternatively, Japan could chart its own path. It could double down on electric vehicles to compete head-to-head with China, forge stronger trade ties with Southeast Asia or Europe, or focus on boosting its domestic economy to rely less on exports. At this point, Japan's looking beyond the U.S. for new partners to hedge its bets. But here's where it gets messy: trust. When allies like the U.S. start flexing economic threats, it really changes the game. Japan has backed U.S. goals for years, often at its own expense. Now getting slapped with tariffs feels like a betrayal, and it's not just Japan noticing. Other U.S. allies like South Korea, the Philippines, or India are starting to wonder if they're next. If the U.S. can pressure a close partner like Japan, who's safe? This could dent America's credibility in Asia, opening the door for China to swoop in with sweeter trade deals and fewer strings attached. Ironically, the U.S. tariffs are backfiring big time. They were aimed at protecting American jobs, but they've hit vehicles mostly made in the U.S. by American workers using parts from trade deals like NAFTA and its successor, the USMCA. Instead of arguing publicly, Japan's playing it smart, taking quiet strategic steps to protect its interests. Nissan slashed production of its Rogue model by 13,000 units at its Kyushu plant. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment choice. Nissan anticipated the impact of new tariffs and acted accordingly. Similarly, Toyota redirected investments to Thailand, bypassing further expansion in the US. These moves weren't hasty reactions. Japan had been preparing for this since trade tensions flared in 2018, ready to roll out contingency plans when needed. This signals a broader trend. Japanese automakers no longer view the US as a stable manufacturing hub. So, what's next for Japan's auto industry? Rather than doubling down in the US, Japanese companies are pivoting to Southeast Asia. Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia are emerging as new production powerhouses. Toyota is spreading its electric vehicle production across 5 countries. Mazda committed $150 million to EV factories in Thailand. Most strikingly, Toyota sealed a $2 billion deal to build an EV plant in Shanghai, China, a move that would have seemed unthinkable years ago amid US-China tensions. But with confidence in the US waning, even China appears a safer bet. The decline of Japanese car production in the US won't be abrupt, but it's already happening. New models are quietly being assigned to plants outside America. Japan is strategically placing its bets elsewhere. What does this mean for America's economic future? How far will this shift go? The global auto industry is at a turning point, and the ripple effects will be massive. To stay ahead of these changes, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This story is just getting started, and what's coming next will reshape the auto industry and beyond.